Alien predator trapped a human child. Then the Badger's roar shook the ground. The screaming started at 0600 hours when the Krell hunter materialized behind little Emma Collins on the outskirts of New Haven Colony. The child had wandered beyond the perimeter fence chasing her cat, and now the 8-foot reptilian alien had her cornered against the electrified barrier. Its 3 eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction as plasma claws extended from its scaled hands. Emma's father, Dan Collins, heard the scream from 300 yards away. He was loading supplies onto his transport when that sound cut through the morning air and stopped his heart. Every parent knows that particular pitch of terror. He dropped everything and ran, his work boots pounding the red Martian soil. The Krell had been hunting humans for sport across 12 colonies now. They were apex predators from a death world where mercy meant extinction. This one had tracked Emma's scent for 2 miles, waiting for the perfect moment when she was alone and vulnerable. It chittered with excitement. In no hurry. The hunt was the pleasure, not the kill. Dan rounded the storage depot and saw his daughter pressed against the fence, tears streaming down her face. The Krell stood between them, its tail swishing with anticipation. Dan had no weapon. He had nothing but his fists and the fury of a father watching his child face death. He charged anyway. The alien backhanded him casually, sending him sprawling into the dirt. Dan tasted blood and sand. His ribs screamed where the blow had connected. The Kale laughed, a horrible clicking sound that echoed across the empty field. It turned back to Emma, savoring her fear. Dan tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. His vision blurred. He could hear Emma sobbing, calling for him. The Krell raised one clawed hand, taking its time teaching the human the price of weakness. Then the ground trembled. It started as a low vibration that made pebbles dance. Then it grew into a rumble that shook the fence posts. The Krell paused, its head cocking to one side in confusion. In its arrogance, it had forgotten the most important rule about humans. They never hunt alone. The roar that followed was not human. It was the sound of 8,000 pounds of fury, wrapped in composite armor and powered by a hydrogen fusion core. The Mark 7 Badger combat mech crested the ridge doing 60 miles per hour, its pilot already locked onto the Krell's thermal signature. Lieutenant Katie Morrison had been running Patrol 2 clicks out when she picked up Emma's screams on her audio sensors. She had pushed the Badger past its safety limits, the mech's servos shrieking in protest. Now she had visual confirmation, and her targeting computer was painting the alien with a dozen weapon solutions. The Krell saw death coming and tried to run. Katie triggered the Badger's speakers at maximum volume, letting loose with the unit's signature war cry, a sound designed to terrorize and disorient. The shockwave of pure noise rolled across the field like a physical thing, shattering windows in the nearby buildings. The alien stumbled, its sensory organs overloaded. That hesitation cost it everything. Katie slammed the Badger's right fist into the ground, creating a wall of dirt and debris that separated the Krell from Emma. Then she brought the mech's full weight down on the Predator. The fight lasted 8 seconds. The Krell was fast, deadly, and had killed 40 humans across 6 colonies, but it had never faced a parent operating a war machine specifically designed to kill things that killed humans. Katie showed it no mercy, because mercy was a human concept, and right now she was not feeling particularly human. She was feeling like a mother bear, a lioness, a creature that understood only one law: touch our children and die screaming. When it was over, Katie ejected from the Badger and ran to Emma. The little girl was shaking, but alive. Dan had crawled to his daughter and wrapped her in his arms, both of them crying. Katie stood guard over them, her sidearm drawn, scanning for additional threats. The colony alarms wailed across New Haven. More mechs thundered in from the perimeter. Medical teams raced toward them, but the danger had passed. The Krell had learned what every predator species eventually discovered about humanity. We protect our young with everything we have, and we have built machines that make gods weep. 3 hours after the attack, Dan Collins sat in the colony medical center with his arm around Emma. His ribs were taped and his face was bruised, but he was alive. Emma clutched her recovered cat and stared at nothing, processing the trauma with the resilience only children possess. Katie Morrison stood outside, still in her combat suit, refusing to leave until she knew they were safe. The other pilots called her Mama Bear behind her back. She wore the nickname with pride. The Krell Empire had sent the Hunter to test human defenses, to probe for weakness, to see if these newcomers to the galactic stage could be intimidated into submission. They had found their answer in the smoking crater where their operative used to be. They would find the same answer at every human colony across known space. Humans did not negotiate with child killers. They did not show mercy to those who threatened the innocent. They brought mechs, guns, ships, and the absolute conviction that some lines could never be crossed. The Badger's roar had shaken the ground, but it was the message behind that roar that echoed across the stars. A declaration carved in plasma and steel. Try again and find out what happens when you make humanity angry. The Krell response came faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours of the New Haven incident, 15 more hunters materialized across human-controlled space. They appeared in parks, schools, residential districts, always targeting children, always hunting in areas where civilians gathered. The Empire had decided that if one hunter could create such chaos, a coordinated strike would break human morale completely. They were wrong. The attack on the riverside settlement on Europa occurred during the morning school session. 3 Krell materialized inside the compound, their cloaking technology allowing them to bypass the standard sensors. They had chosen their moment perfectly. 200 children between the ages of 5 and 12 gathered in the central plaza for outdoor exercises. Teacher Martin Brooks saw the shimmer in the air first. His combat training from the Titan Wars kicked in before his conscious mind registered the threat. He was already shoving kids toward the shelters when the first Krell solidified, its plasma claws extending toward a boy named Joey Parks. Martin threw himself between them, taking a slash across his chest that burned through his shirt and into muscle. He screamed but did not fall. Instead, he grabbed Joey and hurled him toward the shelter entrance where other teachers were herding the panicked students. The Krell pack moved with coordinated precision, trying to separate the adults from the children, but they had miscalculated one crucial factor. The teachers at Riverside were not helpless civilians. They were veterans, retired soldiers who had chosen education as their second career. They had survived wars. They knew how to fight. Sarah Bennett, who had lost her legs in combat and walked on advanced prosthetics, pulled a pulse rifle from the emergency locker. She had kept it there against regulations, knowing that rules meant nothing when children were dying. She opened fire, her shots forcing the lead Krell to abandon its pursuit and seek cover. The colony defense grid activated 90 seconds into the attack. Automated turrets rose from hidden positions and began tracking the aliens. But 90 seconds was an eternity when children were screaming and dying. The Krell had killed 2 teachers and wounded 6 students before the first shots rang out. Then Lieutenant Marcus Webb arrived with his mech squadron. Webb commanded a unit of 4 Badgers, each painted with kill markings from previous encounters with Krell raiders. His team had been drilling 2 miles outside the settlement when the alert came through. They covered the distance in under 3 minutes, their mechs tearing up the icy surface of Europa in their desperate rush. The lead Krell heard them coming and tried to grab a hostage. It lunged for a girl named Lisa Chen, its claws reaching for her throat. Martin Brooks, bleeding and barely conscious, threw his body over the child one final time. The claws punched through his back and erupted from his chest. He smiled at Lisa through his pain and whispered that she would be okay. Then Webb's Badger crashed through the settlement wall like the fist of an angry god. The mech's targeting computer had already calculated optimal firing solutions. Webb triggered a burst from his shoulder-mounted railgun, the hypersonic projectiles crossing the distance in microseconds. The Krell holding Martin disintegrated, its body unable to withstand the kinetic energy. The other 2 aliens split up, trying to use the buildings for cover, but Webb's team had trained for exactly this scenario. Mechs took flanking positions, cutting off escape routes, while automated drones provided aerial surveillance. There was nowhere to run. The second Krell tried to use its cloaking technology, shimmering out a visible spectrum. Webb switched to thermal imaging and tracked the heat signature. He fired a cluster of micro-missiles that bracketed the area, the explosions stripping away the alien's technological advantage along with most of its armor. It staggered into the open, wounded and desperate. Pilot Rachel Torres brought her Badger down on it with both feet, the impact driving the alien 3 feet into the frozen ground. She did not lift her mech until she was certain nothing remained alive beneath it. The third Krell, seeing its packmates destroyed, attempted a final desperate gambit. It triggered a plasma grenade, intending to take as many humans with it as possible. But Sarah Bennett, still firing from her position near the shelter, shot the device from the alien's hand before it could arm the weapon. The grenade skittered across the plaza, inert. The Krell reached for another weapon, but Webb was already there. His Badger's hand closed around the alien like a vice, squeezing until armor cracked and bones shattered. He lifted the dying creature to his mech's optical sensors and spoke one word through the external speakers. Why? The Krell chittered something that the translation software rendered as contempt. It died still believing in its superiority, unable to comprehend why the humans fought so hard for creatures that were not even their own offspring. Webb released the corpse and immediately moved to secure the area. Medical teams flooded in, treating the wounded, evacuating the traumatized. Martin Brooks died in Sarah Bennett's arms. His last words a question about whether the kids were safe. She lied to him and said yes, knowing that 2 students had not made it to the shelters in time. The Krell Empire learned nothing from Riverside. They continued their attacks, hitting settlements across Mars, Titan, Ganymede, and a dozen asteroid colonies. Each attack followed the same pattern. Target children. Create chaos. Demonstrate humanity's weakness. And each attack ended the same way, with Krell corpses and human pilots standing guard over the survivors, daring the Empire to try again. After the 15th failed attack, something unprecedented happened. A Krell diplomatic vessel requested permission to enter human space. They came under flag of truce, seeking to understand why their perfect strategy had collapsed so completely. The human response was simple. They sent video footage from every attack, showing the Krell diplomats exactly what happened when they threatened human children. The footage showed mechs crushing aliens, teachers dying to protect students, and civilians arming themselves to defend the young. Then humanity's representative, Ambassador Richard Hayes, delivered a message that would be remembered for generations. You hunted our children because you thought we were weak. You believed that targeting the defenseless would break our spirit, but you failed to understand the fundamental nature of humanity. We are not strong because we are fearless. We are strong because we have something worth protecting. You see children as targets. We see them as the reason we build weapons, the reason we train soldiers, the reason we will burn your empire to ash if you ever threaten them again. The Krell diplomats processed this information with growing unease. Their species had conquered 47 other races by using exactly this strategy: terrorize the civilians, break morale, force surrender. It had worked every time, because every other species valued their own survival above all else. Humans were different. Humans had built their entire civilization around the concept of self-sacrifice for future generations. They honored those who died protecting children. They built monuments to teachers who stepped between students and danger. They programmed their war machines to respond with overwhelming force the moment a child screamed. The Empire had not attacked a species. They had attacked a species' reason for existing. Ambassador Hayes continued his speech, his voice cold and precise. Your hunters killed 37 humans across 15 attacks. 20 of them were children. You thought this would make us surrender. Instead, you have guaranteed that humanity will never stop hunting you. Every parent, every teacher, every soldier in our species now knows your name. They know what you did, and they will remember. The Krell diplomats attempted to negotiate, offering reparations, technology, even territorial concessions. Hayes refused everything. There is no negotiation when you murder children. There is only justice. You will withdraw from all systems within 50 light-years of human space. You will transmit detailed specifications for your cloaking technology so we can counter it. And you will deliver every hunter involved in the attacks for trial under human law. The Empire's lead diplomat, an ancient warrior called Vex who had led conquest fleets against numerous species, stood to his full height and issued what he clearly believed was a threat. And if we refuse, what will you do then, humans? Will you declare war on an empire that spans 300 star systems? Hayes smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. He gestured to the viewport, where 12 human battleships had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Each ship was 3 times the size of the Krell diplomatic vessel, bristling with weapons that made the alien technology look primitive by comparison. We already built these ships, Hayes said quietly. We built them because we knew eventually someone would make us use them. You chose to be that someone when you killed our children. So yes, Vex, if you refuse, we will declare war. And we will win, because we are fighting for something you cannot comprehend. We are fighting so that no human child ever has to face your hunters again. Vex looked at the battleships and understood, perhaps for the first time in his long life, what it meant to face an enemy that could not be intimidated. The Krell had conquered through fear. Humans had built their civilization on love, and love was a far more powerful motivator than terror. The Empire agreed to every demand. Within a month, they had withdrawn from the border regions. The hunters were delivered in stasis pods, tried in human courts, and executed for their crimes. The cloaking technology was integrated into human sensors, ensuring that no Krell could ever again hide among civilians. But the story did not end with treaties and territorial agreements. It ended 6 months later, on Earth, in a small cemetery in the mountains of Colorado. Lieutenant Katie Morrison stood at Martin Brooks' grave, her dress uniform crisp in the cold mountain air. Around her stood thousands of other pilots, teachers, soldiers, and civilians who had answered the call when children screamed. Some wore medals. Some walked with canes or prosthetics. All of them understood why they were there. Emma Collins approached Katie, holding her father's hand. The little girl carried a hand-drawn picture showing a giant robot protecting a child. She had drawn it for Katie, her way of saying thank you for the day the badger's roar had saved her life. Katie accepted the drawing with tears in her eyes. She knelt down to Emma's level and spoke softly. "You know why we did it, right? Why all of us fight so hard?" Emma nodded, her young face serious beyond her years. "Because you love us." Katie smiled and pulled the child into a gentle hug. "'Cause we love you more than anything in this universe. More than our own lives. And anyone who threatens you will learn what happens when they make that mistake." Dan Collins placed his hand on Katie's shoulder, unable to speak through his own emotions. The three of them stood together as the ceremony continued, honoring all who had fallen defending humanity's future. Across human space, similar ceremonies took place. Children who had been saved visited the graves of those who had died protecting them. Pilots stood guard at memorials. Teachers returned to classrooms filled with students who understood that their safety had been purchased with blood and sacrifice. The Krell Empire never attacked human space again. They told themselves it was because of the battleships, the superior technology, the strategic implications of further conflict, but the truth was simpler and more terrifying. They had seen what humans became when their children were threatened. They had watched civilians become soldiers, teachers become warriors, and parents become unstoppable forces of nature. They had learned that humanity's greatest weakness was also their greatest strength. Humans loved their young enough to die for them. And in a universe where survival often meant abandoning the weak, that made humanity something the Krell could not defeat. The galaxy took notice. Other species watched the recordings from New Haven and Riverside, studying how humans responded to threats against their offspring. They saw the mechs, the weapons, the absolute refusal to surrender even when facing impossible odds. They understood the message. Human children were not targets. They were lines that could not be crossed. They were protected by a species that had built entire industries around keeping them safe. Educational systems, medical technology, military doctrine, all designed with one purpose in mind: the next generation must survive. Ambassador Hayes spent the remaining years of his career explaining this concept to confused alien diplomats. Many of them came from species where offspring were expendable, where only the strong survived to adulthood, where parental investment was minimal. They could not comprehend why humans spent so much resources on creatures that contributed nothing to society. Hayes always gave them the same answer. Children are not investments. They are not resources. They are the reason we exist. Every discovery, every invention, every sacrifice we make is so that they can inherit a better world than we did. You see them as weak. We see them as everything worth protecting. Some species understood. They formed alliances with humanity based on mutual respect and shared values. Others kept their distance, unwilling to accept a philosophy so alien to their own nature. And a few, like the Krell, nursed their resentment and waited for opportunities for revenge that would never come, because humanity had learned the hard lesson that preparing for war was the only way to ensure peace. They kept building battleships. They kept training pilots. They kept developing better sensors, stronger armor, deadlier weapons. Not out of aggression, but out of love for those who could not defend themselves. The Badgers became a symbol of this philosophy. Every colony requested them. Every settlement wanted pilots stationed nearby. The mechs themselves evolved, incorporating new technology, becoming faster and more lethal with each generation. But their primary mission never changed: protect the innocent, respond to screams, stand between children and anything that wishes them harm. Katie Morrison eventually retired from active duty and became an instructor, training the next generation of pilots. She taught them tactics and weapons and strategy, but most importantly, she taught them why they fought. On the first day of training, she would show new recruits the picture Emma had drawn, the crude crayon image of a badger standing over a small figure, both of them smiling. Then she would tell them the story of New Haven, of Riverside, of all the times humanity had proven that love was stronger than fear. And she would end every lecture with the same words: "You are not warriors. You are guardians. Your job is not to win battles. Your job is to make sure children can sleep safely at night. Never forget that. Never hesitate when you hear a child scream, because in those moments you are not piloting a machine. You are embodying everything humanity believes in. You are showing the universe what we truly are." The recruits would graduate, get assigned to colonies across human space, and spend years on patrol hoping they would never need to fire their weapons. But when the moment came, when sensors detected threats near schools or parks or anywhere children gathered, they responded with the same fury Katie had shown that day on New Haven. The badger's roar continued to shake the ground across 100 worlds. It was not a sound of aggression. It was a promise, a declaration, a reminder to anything watching from the darkness that humanity had drawn a line in the cosmic sand. Touch our children and learn what monsters we can become.